Well, good afternoon, viewers. I wonder what we're going to get into on this 2014 Ram. Customer was talking to me a couple of days ago and he asked me when I could change this ignition switch. So I, of course, asked him what the problem was, and he said, well, I can't get the key out of it sometimes. As you can see, the key is out of it now. And I said, is there anything else going on? He said, well, sometimes it doesn't indicate that it's in park. And that's when I can't get the key out of the ignition. I said, well, the two problems are likely related. If it's not indicating it's in park, it may not release the lock cylinder. See, I can pull the key out no problem now. Let's try putting it in drive. I see the check engine light and the stability control light are on, but service trailer brake system problem might be related. This vehicle not in park because I have the door open. Let me shut the door so I simulate normal driving conditions. Put it in park. Reverse, neutral, drive, park, turn it off, pull the key out. Well, we're going to drive it in the shop and do a network scan, and hopefully there's some codes in history that will point us in the right direction. Could be a network communication problem. Could be the manual lever position sensor. However that is designed, that indicates whether it's in park or not. I forget what he said it actually showed. I think he said it wasn't lit up at all, like, you notice how it's in green here and then it's in green in park. I think it was not lit up at all. Well, let's pull it in the shop here and do a network scan of all the controllers and see if we got any clues as to what's going on. So this is a new vehicle record. I don't think I've scanned this before. Should auto ID. I've got a clean battery charger on it, and it is an E 2014. $117,000 kilometers. Display fitted systems. Let's do a network code scan of all the controllers and see what it has to say. Implausible data received from brake control system. Okay. ABS DTC present. Brake switch 1 stuck on. Interesting. Battery system voltage low. TCM power input low, line pressure high. And then it repeats again in the transmission computer because that's the engine control computer. Brake pressure sensor, general electrical failure. Left low beam control circuit, left high beam control circuit. Those are battery active stored, active stored. Integrating implausible data received from the ABS. Remote keyless entry fob performance. Brake switch stuck, circuit stuck low. Switch circuit A, low voltage. Okay, well, the codes of concern is related to this brake switch in the ABS, in my opinion. C0044-01. Let me write that down. Line pressures high and TCM power input low. That could be just because of low battery voltage. Doesn't tell me if they're current or history. So I'm going to do a network code clear because I've got a record of all these codes in the. And then we're going to look at some data and some code setting criteria for that C0044 and see if it could be related to our key stuck in the ignition. Maybe it has to do with if it thinks your foot's on the brake, you can't turn the key off. I don't think so. It could take several seconds or other conditions to set that code, so it's hard to say if it'll come back immediately. So let's go back into the anti-lock brakes and read the codes. Well, that's interesting. It came back immediately. C0044-01. Wonder if troubleshooter's in the Snap-on scan tool. Yes, it is. So let's see if they've got that code listed. Code tips. C0044-01. Code set: when the anti-lock brake system indicates the brake pressure sensor signal is out of range. It's indicating 3,161 psi brake pressure. Possible causes: anti-lock brake system module, hydraulic control unit. The pressure sensor is built into the ABS unit and cannot be replaced with a separate component. Well, that's not good. That reminds me of that Ford F-150 I had, where I ended up changing the ABS hydraulic unit to fix the exact same kind of problem. It was indicating pressure when you're not applying the brake pedal. Well, I'm going to look at some cases. So I loaded the VIN and Identifix and I typed in the keyword C0044 and there's no cases, so that's interesting. Let's look at the diagnostic flow chart. So the brake pressure sensor is located internally in the anti-lock brake system hydraulic control unit. It interfaces directly with the ABS module through spring-loaded contacts. This is exactly the same as that Ford. This is why it's imperative that at the end of the diagnostic procedure, if it's determined that the unit is to be replaced, the entire unit needs to be replaced and not separated. This ensures the unit can be diagnosed as a sensor failure or an internal connection failure. When monitored: ignition on, no under voltage codes. Anti-lock brake system module indicates the brake system sensor signal is out of range. Default actions: electronic stability control system indicator light illuminated, electronic park brake fail indicator light illuminated, and ESC is disabled. Doesn't say anything to do with the ignition, so I don't think this is related. This is a secondary problem. So the code is active. I like that. Step 1, replace the integrated control unit in accordance with the service information. Perform the ABS verification. So if the code comes back, just change the whole thing. You're on your own. But again, I don't think this is related to the actual complaint that he has, where the key won't come out of the ignition, the wireless control module, and there are no codes in it. Maybe I'll do a keyword search for key won't come out and see if I can find any cases on that. So here's a case on Identifix that states the ignition key will not release from the ignition switch. Let's have a look at that. There's a document from Chrysler that gives possible causes and corrections. See related document. Related document. Fobik trapped in wind. That's ignition key cylinder. Man, the mosquitoes are bad in here. Let's see if we got that document from Chrysler. Let's blow this up a little bit. Cannot turn the fobik to lock position. Damaged binding and properly adjusted gear shift cable. Well, that would concur with the not indicating park. Damaged or binding gear shift lever mechanism. No gated park switch input to the WIN. Use the diagnostic scan tool with software release version 8.05 or greater to read and confirm no gated park switch input to the WIN. Key lock solenoid WIN unresponsive to gated park switch input. No gated park switch input. Damage or ineffective gated park switch. Wonder where this gated park switch is. Key lock, solenoid, unresponsive to gated park switch input. So there's a little release solenoid in the wireless ignition node, which is the ignition switch. I'm going to do some more reading. So I'm searching around for a description and operation, and this is the best thing I can find for this ignition switch, which is referred to as a wireless ignition node. It's a rotary type ignition switch is used on the base and midline vehicles, will accept either a steel cut key or remote key fob. It's encased in a bracket mounted to the instrument panel, held in by 4 screws. Thank you very much, Chrysler. That's very helpful. Tell me how the frickin' thing works. I searched for the ignition lock. Maybe we got to look at a wiring diagram, I guess. So I'm looking at the computer list in the Snap-on scan tool here, and it doesn't list the wireless ignition node or the ignition switch, but it does list the radio frequency hub, which I believe is the same thing. Somebody comes up with a new name for everything. I'm going to go into data here. Let's check for codes in that, just for shits and giggles. No codes. There were no codes when it scanned initially. Let's look at data. Radio frequency hub data. Let's see if we got a data parameters related to the ignition key. Ignition position, it's in run position now. Key in ignition, yes. Number of keys, program 2. Trundle position, lever and park. Let's see if there's anything else. Signal strength. I noticed the remote didn't unlock the doors electrically. I had to use the key to open the driver's door. It was locked. Okay, gated park switch. Here it is. Says true. So this is what they're talking about, but is that a separate switch from the transmission range sensor? Come on, just tell us how it works so we can figure out why it doesn't. And the problem is it's not acting up right now. I can take the key out every time. And then we got all these extra problems that are complicating diagnosis. VIN locked, false, valid immobilizer key, yes. Shipping status, customer mode. Well, I'm going to watch the status of this key in ignition, and I'm going to watch the status of these switches while I operate. The shifter back and forth and see if I can get it to act up. Gear shift indicator is indicating park now. Reverse. Neutral. Drive. And it's back in park, indicating park. I'm going back and forth from park to reverse. I did it like 5 or 6 times there. Now the refresh rate of the data is slow, so it might miss it. The bottom right one is the gated park switch. I'm going to do a custom data list here so that we get a better, faster refresh rate. Suppose it's going to pick up. Let's deselect all. This one. This one. This one. Trundle position status. Let's graph those data parameters. I wonder if this gated park switch is a separate switch. Okay. Where gated park switch is in the bottom right hand corner. It says true. And I'm going to go back and shift it back and forth now. Reverse. I put it in park and I didn't see it go back. I'm moving the shift lever towards the steering wheel. And I can hear a solenoid in the steering column locking and unlocking. But the gear shift indicator is working fine. No, that solenoid I hear is inside the lock cylinder, or inside the ignition switch. Oh boy, what to do? The ABS problem is unrelated in my opinion. I think I need to do some more research here before we make a call. But how do you fix it if it isn't broken? At least if there was a high failure rate of a component, or a better circuit description would help too, Chrysler. So I did find a single line here under ignition node module stating ignition key removal inhibit. The key removal inhibit has a motor driven gear internal to the ignition module to facilitate this feature. This prevents the key from going past accessory to off if the gear shifter is not in park. Well, I would think if that was failing, it would still indicate park. But the fact that he specifically stated that it did not indicate park on the instrument cluster leads me to believe that there's a problem external of this pod, and it's doing what it's programmed to do because it doesn't think it's in park. I'm going to look up a wiring diagram. So I stand corrected. The remote radio frequency hub is a separate module in the vehicle that communicates with other electronic modules in the vehicle, either over the CAN network or data bus, private serial bus. So it has a separate module, but it's obviously interfacing with this thing. So I had a talk with the customer, and he's 90% sure that when the problem occurred, it did not indicate park on the gear shift indicator in the dash. But again, it's acting perfectly fine now. Now I looked at the schematic for this thing, and it shows a shift lever assembly with a park inhibit switch input to the radio frequency hub, and the radio frequency hub is then an input to the transmission control module. I guess it depends what transmission. And it's wired, it's networked to the keyless or the ignition switch. So that ignition switch actually contains a stepper motor that actually turns, and I confirmed the sound of that ignition switch. That clicking noise is coming from the actual ignition switch. The actual transmission range sensor is in the transmission solenoid pack, and there are 4 switches in there that are inputs to the PCM, the powertrain control module, and if they don't agree, it would likely set a fault code. And we didn't have any range sensor implausibility fault codes in the history. So I'm kind of at a loss as to what to do because it's acting fine. I'm going to see if I can find this this trans park signal switch in the gear shift lever, And I'm going to disable it, or look for this connector and see if I can disable it, and see if that causes the problem. You can see that it's an input to the radio frequency hub here. There's that splice that goes off to the, and also see if it doesn't indicate park in the instrument cluster when because it does go to the transmission control module, but that's on an 8-speed transmission. I got to figure out what tranny this has too. 6-speed and 8-speed are different. Oh joy. Well, I got the covers off the steering column, and right down inside, it's really hard to show you, but right down inside here is that micro switch. I'm not sure the camera's picking that up. Probably not, because the wiring harness is in the way. You have to have your foot on the brake, and if I unplug that switch while it's in drive, or like right now when it's out of park, I can't turn the key off. And then you must turn the key back on. Let's turn the light on my camera here. See, that helps. See that little white pin? That's the micro switch. But when I unplug that, the gear shift indicator doesn't act off. So I'm at a loss as to what to do here. So I'm monitoring the voltage on that yellow, dark blue wire at that micro switch. And when I pull the shift lever towards the steering wheel, it goes to 13.2. And when I go back, it goes to 0. And I'm just doing this. But again, that doesn't affect the gear shift indicator. So I don't know if we believe what he perceived, that it wasn't in park. Again, I'm chasing a ghost here. The switch is working flawlessly. And of course, I can take the key out of the ignition, put the key back in the ignition. If I put the shift lever like that, it indicates park, but it's not in park. I can't take the key out of the ignition. And then you have to turn the key back on, and you have to make sure the shift lever is all the way towards all the way up and all the way towards the dash. It's possible that he's not putting it all the way in park. Because like that, you can hear that that thing is not released now. It's still at 13 volts. And of course it won't, because it's a motor. You got to turn the key back on to run. So I'm wondering if he's having an issue with this gear shift lever. Maybe he's not getting it all the way back into park. Like there, it still indicates it's in park, but the shift lever is not until you push it up and it goes back towards the dash. And if you disable that switch so that it thinks it's in park, then you can't shift the shifter. Like if I unplug that shift, like there's a solenoid on the shifter too. If I'm not mistaken, like with it in park, I'm gonna unplug this connector at the steering column here. Where is it? Now, I can't turn the key off, but I can't move the shifter either. So you can't just disable that switch, because you won't be able to shift it out of park. So underneath this RAM, to visually look at the gear shifter to see if there's anything obviously wrong, and I don't see anything obviously wrong, but I notice the oil pan is leaking. It's rusted out. That's just special. Yeah. What do you have to do to change this oil pan? Looks like drop this differential. Yeah, probably have to drop the differential or raise the engine, or both. What do you think about this stub shaft here? Frick. We're just getting all kinds of fun here. I'm afraid to look. Park brake cables are hanging loose. Oh well. Looks like it's got airbags in it, but they're obviously ruptured. Oh, that's a secondary issue. I better check the oil level in the engine before we drive it too far. It was sitting in my shop for a couple of hours while I was diagnosing it, and it's bleeding to death. He's going to be very pleased. Well, it's about an inch below, or 3/4 of an inch below the add mark. So it's a couple liters low for sure. I'm going to talk to him about whether he wants to do the oil pan on this thing. So that ABS unit looks identical to this one that came off this F-150. I think it's a Kelsey Hayes, if I'm not mistaken. 4 lines on top, 2 lines on the back. 4 lines on top, 2 lines on the back. At least it's easy enough to get to. It's better than on the side of the frame rail down there, but still. The service literature recommends replacement of the entire assembly. I checked for aftermarket on a couple of suppliers and no availability. So let's see what the dealer wants for this magic box. So I decided to do a network scan after having that shifter disconnected electrically. And the interesting thing is the only codes we have are for implausible data received from the ABS and an ABS DTC present, and the brake pressure sensor code. Even the integrated trailer brake is complaining about implausible data from the ABS because that's all tied together. But the radio frequency hub has no codes in it. After disconnecting and reconnecting and fiddling with that solenoid and that switch, it never generated any codes. We're going to go into the ABS system. I cannot find a source for an aftermarket hydraulic unit. Called the dealer, they're on back order, no estimated time of ETA. The hydraulic portion of it is 1660 Canadian, and the module itself is 1555 Canadian, and there's no stock anywhere in North America. They're on global back order. Let's look at data in the ABS unit. I can get a used one, and I think I could replace just the hydraulic unit on it. Let's look at the brake pressure. Brake pedal status says released. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Yeah, primary circuit pressure is 3,161. This is exactly the same type of failure that I had on that F-150. And I ended up changing the hydraulic assembly. I put a used one in. I did transfer the module from the original one to the used one. And I tried a new or a used module on it, but that didn't fix it. And the sensor is part of the ABS unit, the hydraulic unit. So I'm going to talk it over with the customer. I've come to a standstill with the shifter and the ignition lock. I think he might not be getting it all the way into park with the lever all the way against away from the steering wheel. But again, unless it acts up for me, I can't diagnose it. So if I do end up changing the hydraulic unit, I'll make another video on that.